Hi guys, I hope you're doing well. This week I actually have 4 updates to show you. It was a pretty intense week. In this update, I managed to give the guy the animations back. And not just back, but finally properly implemented. By triggering depending on the guy's speed, not by manually assigning each animation like before. Also, now the guy will transition between animations automatically. Once reached the speed limit, it will go from idling to walking, and from walking to running, and vice versa, when reaching this limit. Because at this stage I was done defining the provisional obedience behavior, I defaulted its value to 10, so I wouldn't have to train and waste time every time I wanted to test something. Great idea since this happened constantly. I started working on the pause menu. I added the pause button on the bottom right corner. Clicking this will open a simple pause menu. I added a couple of buttons as placeholders, with the only working button being the exit button, and the one that closes the menu also. Note, even if I keep calling it pause menu, it wouldn't technically do that yet, since I didn't know how to stop the time in the game. If we leave the scene by clicking the exit button, this will take us to the start menu again. If we were to click again on the world, this will reset the scene. Even if I just made one button interactable, I spent great time just coming up and designing the menu, in order to be intuitive and to have understandable icons without any text, what is actually harder than it looks. The travel system was still not properly working, only the snow world button was kind of. This will trigger the snow particle emitter to change the looks, but it wouldn't really change the scene, as it should do later on. When entering social mode, some new fixes were added. When clicking Hi, this order will override the previous command and trigger the player's attention, plus it will also make him approach us. In this version, the tricks were still working by default, triggering the animation when the button was pressed. Another thing that was added to the guy's behavior was that now he could get bored, both in normal or top view mode and in social mode. If you don't interact with him, after a certain time goes on, he will go back to wandering mode and you will have to call the guy again to get its attention. In this version, I finally made the traveling system work. I made the first world to travel as well as some mock-up icons for how the world should be displayed when not unlocked, with grayed out icons. The ones working would be interactable. Here I implemented very basic transitions between scenes. The available world at the moment was the forest world tile that I made. All the tiles should be the same size as the home world, with the only difference being what is in them. This will be like different realities occupying the same space, and therefore the name of the game. I started with a single other world to understand how loading new scenes work. This initial other worlds objective was mostly to show variety and the type of scenarios that we will be able to play in the future, and also to work on the travel system. In this update, as you can see in the floor and the grass, I started to learn how the Unity's terrain tools work. I also started experimenting with light and different skyboxes, as well as wind effects on the grass. All this was more a learning exercise rather than an actual game addition, to see what would be possible to do later on, and get inspired for when I eventually start making other worlds. Unfortunately, even if everything ended up running and looking very good, it was a huge hit on the graphics card, keeping it to 85% usage in this new world, compared to the 10% on the previous one, because of the new light rendering, what made it unplayable for a smartphone, because the considerably weaker processing power that they have. This new scene also helped me understand that now I will need a different user interface and different game mechanics from my home world, like having different button layouts for the travel system, for example. Here I had to create a new button that will load the original home world rather than a new forest world. By traveling back, we reload the home scene and reset also some variables like the energy amount or the obedience number. On this update, I was trying to come up with a system that would allow the player to remain always visible, since the camera position is locked in place and the guy can be hidden by big objects, mostly trees. After lots of ideation and checking how other games deal with this issue, I decided to add a behavior in each big object with a trigger area that will change the material, with a more transparent color, of the object when the player enters the area. Then the material will go back to normal when the player exits the area. I imported another tree model from the demo pack I got from the Unity store and started working on the prefab with the transparent behavior so I could be able to copy and paste in different scenes on the future. The previous tree was there just for the looks. A new demo scene was added to the forest worlds. I was still learning how to make different environments. On this one, if you look closely to the shadows, you can see that I added a daylight cycle that rotates the sun. I kept adding different assets to learn how to import them when creating these outworlds. Again, the purpose of making this was purely aesthetic without them being interactable or playable yet. On the last update of this week, I worked on the guy menu. Most of the work was done planning and thinking on paper how different mechanics should work. I added an obedience slider and a health slider. The health slider, or world link, would be the life indicator. This will be what allows the guy to remain in other realities. When defeated, the guy will lose the link with the world and be transported back to his home world. Another major addition on this update was adding sound effects. I learned and implemented sound effects being triggered on objects. I added both types, localized and global ones. The spatial sound effects will sound different depending on where they are located from the camera, and the global ones will be heard the same from everywhere. Some examples of 3D spatial sounds were the break sounds that the rocks made when destroyed. And the other type would be the sound effects that will be triggered when clicking on buttons. The obedience slider, or God link, will be the indicator that shows the connection with God, the person that is playing the game. Again, I keep calling it God and Guy, but they won't be names on the game. These are just for me to understand who am I talking about. The obedience was changed to work by adding +1 when successfully doing a trick rather than by getting its attention like before. And now the tricks will act as small changes or minigames that will reward the player when performing them successfully, rather than just feeling like a meaningless task like before. In this version, I added the first playable minigame with a very basic challenge for now, and kept the interaction between the guy and God more interesting. It was also added the script that will make the guy lose obedience over time. This will reward the player by coming back often to interact with the guy, or punish if you forget about your friend by needing to perform tricks again to regain the obedience that you got lost. The obedience slider is both present in normal view and when socializing in the close-up view. Not only sliders were added, but additional green and red icons will pop up with sound effects to give better feedback when earning or losing obedience. Finally, some issues or bugs to mention were related to the transparent tree interaction behavior. One problem when having multiple trees was that they would interfere with each other and not change the material properly. Also, when going in social mode, the trees will still trigger what shouldn't really happen, since the transparency makes sense only when looking from above. A last bug was the ability to spam the trick button that doesn't require a minigame to improve fast the obedience level, and basically being able to cheat the obedience behavior. This was kept on purpose as a feature for now, since it was useful when testing the game. That's it for this week. I think next week I only have 2 updates, so the video will be a bit shorter than this one. If you guys are interested in the rest of the development, subscribe so you will be able to follow the progress. If you guys have any comments, please leave it down there. I will be happy to read your thoughts. So that's it for this week. Bye!